This video is another installment in my series of how moving abroad changed my life or impacted me in different areas of my life. So I already talked about mental health and I talked about my career. Today we're talking about religion and faith. Spoiler alert, I didn't convert to another religion. I didn't do anything drastic. It just sort of opened my mind a little bit more. I've been a Christian my whole life. I grew up in a Christian family, and living here, that hasn't been a hard thing to do. Obviously, this is a very Christian country. They're very proud of the fact that there's an open Bible in the middle of their flag, and that's the only country that has one. So it's not a challenge to be a Christian here at all. At the risk of sounding too obvious or sounding like, well, duh, moving abroad really helped me see, wow, there's definitely more than one way for someone to be a Christian. I realized that as much as the church tries to be countercultural and not be influenced by the culture, we are very much influenced by the cultural environment that surrounds us, that we're born into. Even when I went to college in Maryland, that was an eye-opening experience. I met Christians who had very different worldviews than the ones I had grown up with. So moving abroad just expanded that idea of what a Christian looks like even more. Growing up in the US, we may see our faith entirely different from someone growing up in a different culture. Ideally, yes, Christians would share values and worldviews and all sort of have one perspective, but I think we know even in the US that's not true. So even less so in the whole world. It's nearly impossible not to be affected by your environment. I'm going to talk about a few examples that are very specific. The first one is taking God's name in vain. So this is the third commandment. You shall not misuse the name of your Lord your God. You should not take his name in vain. And growing up, for me, this always meant you can't say, oh my God. If you say that, then that's taking God's name in vain. So we always said, oh my gosh, oh my goodness, oh my word, something else. But here, it was such a surprise to me to learn that saying Dios mío, which is like, oh my God, like the translation for oh my God, is the more Christian thing to say, because the alternative would just be saying Diablo, which means devil. Forgive me, all the Christians who are watching in Spanish. So it's preferred to say Dios mío, oh my God, because then you're actually acknowledging God and you're not talking about the devil. So many Christians say that's the preferred thing to say and not something else, some other substitute. And that was wild to me when I first learned that. I was like, wait, what? That's not taking God's name in vain? So yeah, that was crazy to me. It's like, oh, so that's what they want you to say, because then they're at least acknowledging God. They're lifting up God's name rather than using the devil's name. So that was the first eye-opening experience for me. And it really made me realize, oh, you can be so convinced of something and everyone in your culture may have that same conviction, but you go to another country and it could be an entirely different conviction that they have. But it really just goes to show you can interpret things very differently. And the second thing I noticed is drinking as a Christian is much less common here than it is in the US. Growing up, my family didn't drink, but I knew other Christians who did, and I just sort of accepted, okay, some people do this, some people don't. But here it's much more common that Christians who go to church or regular churchgoers will not drink or will not do drugs or anything like that. So that was something I was like, oh, okay, I fit in here better in a way. The next activity is dancing. So I love to dance. I grew up in ballet, and after that I did some other kinds of dance, like hip-hop dancing, and it's just something I love to do. And here, dancing is a very non-Christian activity. So in that sense, I was like, well, I think I fit in better in the US in that regard, because Christians at weddings will throw it down on the dance floor like nobody's business, okay? That's like the best part of the wedding, the dance floor. Christians and non-Christian weddings alike. But here, the weddings don't even have dancing because Christians just don't dance. I have heard from one friend, she said, you can dance like with your husband in your house. I was like, oh, okay. So dancing is okay, but not like in public as other people do it. So that's something where I'm like, okay, that's good for y'all. I will dance. Like, I'm not going out to clubs and dancing in public. 'Cause I'm like, okay, well, here Christians aren't supposed to be seen dancing, I guess. But I'll have my own dance parties in my house, and I danced at my wedding. But yeah, I remember when we were in Honduras, my friends worked for a Christian school there, and they wanted to go to kind of like a club and do some bachata dancing. And they wanted to go for the experience and to learn how to dance, because as American Christians, dancing is not a big deal to us. But if they were seen there as teachers for a Christian school, it might become a problem because it's kind of a small town. So they didn't go. I'm not of the same opinion. I think Christians can dance, but I do see where they're coming from. And another thing here is Christians shouldn't listen to a lot of secular music like bachata, merengue, dembow. Those kinds of genres Christians would rather not listen to. And I'm not saying I listen to those either, like, just because that's what I prefer. But yeah, I think some Christians in the US are more against secular music, but others might not be. Here, it's definitely more common that they'll just avoid all secular music. But in this country, people are, in general, even if they're not a regular churchgoer, they're more likely to have a Christian outlook as opposed to the US, where we have a really wide variety of different views, even if it is technically predominantly Christian. For example, if you say God bless you, Dios te bendiga, to someone on the street, they'll probably say amen. But in the US, I don't know if people will have the same reaction. It depends on the person. So they'll be more appreciative here of like a Christian blessing, or like saying I'll pray for you or something like that, from what I've seen. Again, this is my limited perspective. I've only been regularly attending 2 churches. I've visited a couple others, but from what I've seen, this is the general consensus. The next thing that I've seen here that honestly I don't understand, and it's just me coming from an entirely different culture, because no matter what, the church is going to be affected by the culture. Not even like cultural things like dembow music is popular, that's affecting the church. Not like that at all. It's just things that are even deeper at a more basic level that we might not even realize if we're not exposed to other cultures. And this next one is men having long hair. So I know in the Bible it says like men shouldn't have long hair, it's shameful for a man to have long hair. And I think for a while in the US that was a pretty predominant viewpoint. Now, in the 21st century, I don't think too many people have that opinion. Of course, there are still people who believe that, but it's not like that big of a deal. But here, it's funny for me because as a white person, like, obviously my hair grows differently than many of the people here who have an entirely different hair texture. And so for me, when I see someone that maybe the church would consider to have long hair, I'm like, that's not even long hair at all. For example, my husband was growing out his hair for our wedding because he wanted to have a little bit of a longer hairstyle for the wedding. He had shorter hair for the engagement pictures, and he wanted to have a bit more of curls for the wedding. And people at his church were saying, like, cut your hair, make it look nice, like, cut your hair for your wedding so it'll look better. And it's crazy to me because if you look at our wedding pictures, like, that's not even, like, as a white person, that's not even what I would consider long hair. But I know, like, if you stretch out the curls, maybe they would be longer. But anyways, I'm sorry for laughing. It's just very different. And when it comes down to it, I don't understand. I'm sorry, it's hair. Everybody's hair is going to be different. And if a guy has longer hair than his chin, I don't really see how that impacts his life in the grand scheme of things. There's so many things where I learned, okay, there's a lot more gray areas than I might have grown up believing, seeing the Bible through my American perspective. So I am very grateful to have the experience of being a Christian in both the US culture and the Dominican culture, because there's lots of things I've learned. I've seen lots of criticisms from here towards the US culture, and I'm not going to say some of them aren't valid, but I don't know. I have some things where I'm like, that's an interesting take here. Overall, it's been interesting. There are definitely places where I feel like I fit in more as a Christian, and others were not so much because, like, one of the churches I go to, people don't even wear that much jewelry. They try to dress very modestly. Our women, like, always wear skirts. And I know there's some Christian groups in the US that do dress that way, but for the most part, Christians will dress with a lot more variety, I will say, in the US. If you see the lady who's wearing at least a knee-length skirt and like a well-covering t-shirt, then they might be a Christian, because that's just how they always dress. And it's interesting to me because I had that experience one time where I was out with someone from the church and they were wearing a longer skirt and a shirt, and I was wearing jeans and a shirt, and this lady looked at her and she was like, "You're a Christian, aren't you?" It's very interesting for me. I was like, huh. Okay, so people will judge you by what you're wearing and judge if you're a Christian or not based on that. So that was an interesting experience. And it did make me think, like, should I be dressing so I'm recognizable just by what I'm wearing? Because I've always thought it should be something deeper, and I think I'm still of that opinion. It should be more by our actions that speak to whether or not we are Christian. So in general, I've just seen how there are a lot more gray areas, and how no matter what culture you're in is going to affect how you see the Bible and how you are as a Christian. And that's okay. Like, we are in this world. I would love to hear what you guys think in the comments below. If you have experience being a Christian in both cultures, what your experience has been, that would be cool to hear too. So let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.